Good evening. So I guess I'll start by catching everybody up. Oh, hello. My cat is here. Move it along. I think I spent a couple of days or a couple of evenings working on the back end portion of this project, off stream. So I think where I was when I last was streaming, I was breaking up plain text data from GameFAQs article and building up a database out of it. And I think, yeah, so I revised the schema a little bit. It's pretty similar to how I had it at the start. But now I've got a whole bunch of stuff in there. So I've got some zones. I've got some collectibles in there, 48 of them. What else do I have? I have categories, 8. And that's all cool. And these are all hooked together, so I don't need the data entry interface that I thought I was going to need, which is nice. So we're all set there. So the scratch file can go away. That was my data munging. Right, and so this is where the models are at this point. So these structs are a representation of the data that I'm going to be pulling out of the database. We've got a corresponding struct for each table, and I'm using some macros on each one to have the compiler generate code for me based on the memory layout of each of these objects. So derived debug means that if I want to use string formatting, there's a default representation of this type of struct. So it'll probably show me like a collectible zone membership with 2 values in parens, that kind of thing. Just printing out some kind of string. It basically provides a default toString. Serialize is a macro that comes from a crate called Serde, or I guess there's some debate about the pronunciation, but this library is all about serialization and deserialization. Show me the homepage. So the idea is they provide you macros that will basically build a pipeline for converting structs into different formats. And I don't know, I thought they had a list of formats right on the front page somewhere, but yeah, so there's quite a few there. JSON being the popular one for web development, right? So I've brought in a number of dependencies surrounding the base Serde library. which will get me the ability to pull out a record from my SQLite database, structure it in a memory layout that makes sense for the row, and then immediately transform that into a JSON encoded string, which I can then send out to as my response. So, oh right, yeah, and so Serde also gives you some options about transforming field names. So this macro is gonna just automatically convert all of my fields to camel case. So this one would become collectible ID like that. Once the encoding has been completed. Oh, and then lastly, Queryable, which is a trait that is supplied by Diesel, which is the database system. So I'll jump into that right now. But the gist here is that I'm using macros to basically pimp my types to automatically apply different traits with implementations that are being supplied for me by the framework or library authors, which is kind of nice. So they're generating a lot of boilerplate for me. So Queryable means that I can specify a struct in line with a query that is about to be executed. So in this particular situation, I've got the zones reference, which is a table supplied by schema zones DSL, and I add in an order clause for my query, so it's doing an order by name, and then I transform the query and tell it what kind of object I want to unpack each row into, and then I pass it the database connection, which is coming from some connection pool apparatus that I set up earlier at the start of the project, and that basically gives me a vec of my model, which I then map over, wrapping the result in JSON, and the whole thing, as I run the database query, is wrapped in a query result. So this could succeed or fail. Like if I were to move the database file to a different directory all of a sudden, and then I requested /zones, this would probably fail because the database just wouldn't exist at that point. And so by having each of my responses wrapped in this query result, this helps my application know how to report the failure. So it's going to basically throw a 500 whenever the query results in an error rather than a success. And my cat is just refusing to move. So is this what you need? Need a little cuddle? Talking about the database and the REST endpoints we wrapped around it. Yeah, so you want to go down? You want to stay here? Okay. So yeah, so just a ton of code is being generated on my behalf. If you remember earlier, the schema module that I had defined is basically generated by using reflection on the database. So this infer schema macro will connect to my database at compile time and then analyze the table structures and then generate a bunch of code building me objects that represent my tables and my columns. So all of that becomes available in this DSL submodule. And so when I import that, I'm importing zones from there. I'm importing name, which is a column type. I'm still not certain I want to order this stuff in the back end. In fact, I'm gonna start the day out by removing that stuff. So categories can stay ordered. That's cool. And the collectibles themselves, yeah, I guess so. So the reason why I don't want to mess with the ordering of the zones is because don't I have a well, that's lame. My project's freaking out for some reason. Okay. So let's see. Migrations, zone data. So if I look at the schema or the data files that I generated, I think that I pulled all of these values out of the GameFAQs wiki in the order in which they appeared, and it looks to me like these may be ordered in terms of appearance in the game, and so I'd kind of like to retain that order. So this is the first area, this is the second area, this is yeah, that's near the beginning of the game. It looks like these are all kind of close to each other. And so it may not be 100%, but I think if I mess with the ordering here, it's just going to make things confusing. If I retain this ordering, then I can kind of just step through the list one by one, hopefully. I was going to ask about migrations. It looks like the abstractions for databases are pretty mature. Well, yeah. Everything is kind of immature in the Rust-Lang space right now. Or at least that's my impression. I think Diesel looks pretty solid. I think there are some issues with I don't know, accessibility in your editor. Like the tooling suffers when you start using macros for things, because you know, if you have a macro generating a ton of code inside of a module here, my editor's got no way of knowing what the macro is going to see at compile time. So all of these references to things that are based on the schema in my database, I've just got to keep all the field names and the table names like in my mental model as I work through it. But that said, you know, Diesel itself reminds me a lot of Slick coming from Scala, which has this kind of similarly tight interface where they just want to be thinking about your data in terms of the collection types in the language you're working in, rather than focusing on SQL idioms. So I don't know, it's kind of refreshing. It's also kind of nice to not be totally abstracted away from the underlying system. Like with a lot of ORMs, you're lucky if you can know ahead of time what the SQL is going to be like that gets generated. I mean, obviously my queries are very simple here. I'm essentially pulling entire tables out and making minor changes. And yeah, I should talk about that a little bit because I cheated here, kind of. But yeah, so the endpoints that I built off stream were basically a series of get endpoints that each dump out the contents of an entire table and map that stuff to structs and then convert to JSON. So that's the whole song and dance that I described up here with the zones, and that happens 3-4 times for each of the tables that I have. I also have this this supplemental table up here, or excuse me, this supplemental endpoint, which switches it up. The others are all get method. This one is a put, and so I'm using the same root as the collectibles endpoint that just dumps out the whole table. Except this time I've got baked into the URL a reference to an ID for a particular record. And normally, if I'm building a REST service of some kind, I would be pushing a JSON payload to this endpoint with just like collectibles/ID, and the payload itself would be some mix of fields. For this, I sort of took a shortcut. I named the one field that I want to be able to adjust, and I take the value of that field as the final segment in the URI path. And there are a couple of reasons for that. What I would say is that, generally speaking, for traditional APIs, I would be looking to be able to manipulate multiple fields on a data type. So I would want to be able to update multiple fields on a row at once. But for this application, since it's like a to-do list kind of a thing, I really want to lock it in so that only this one field can change, the collected field. And so that's why I have this kind of purpose-built endpoint here. But again, it's very simple. There was a slight caveat that I wasn't expecting, and that is that so I run my update on a query result. So this query is deferred; it doesn't execute immediately. So I do. This is basically generating the where clause, and so this is the value that I want to set. And I'm reading that in from the URL. So these placeholders are typecast based on the parameters in the handler, right? So it's using these types, Boolean and integer 32, and then finally that gets executed. You'll notice that on my other queries, I'm doing load and specifying the model or the struct that I want to unpack the data into. Well, that doesn't work for updates. And I got the impression from the compiler output that doesn't work for updates specifically when you're using SQLite. Certain database engines allow you to run a query and then return a row like after the result is computed. Using like a returning clause, but I guess SQLite doesn't support that. So what I need to do instead of calling load, because it would have been nice to update the field and then get the entire row back. So instead of calling load here to get a result, I call execute instead, which gets me a result type, but I don't really care. In fact, really, I'm kind of an idiot. I should, what I should probably do here is like unwrap. And so that'll, I could expect probably too. Let's see if this works. Because in my mind, if this fails, I want an error to throw. I want this thread to panic, which would return basically a 500 response, unless I'm mistaken. So assuming that the update takes place, I want to then fetch that entire row for the given ID, and then just return the whole thing. I also kind of considered skipping that part just because of how I envision the front end working. Basically, the front end could say, okay, I want to toggle the state on this particular row, and as long as I see a good status, I'll just set the value to what I said I was setting it to. But I don't know, this feels more complete to me to query the row and return it. But this may be unnecessary. Well, technically the entire project's unnecessary, so I guess that's okay. So let me, since I've been making changes here, let me just verify the work. So yeah, all this database work is kind of ridiculous given the scope of the project. I could really be doing this all in local storage in the client code, or okay, cool. So if I run real quick, this is what we're dealing with here. So we got some zones. This is the boring table. Membership. This is just pairing up collectibles and zones. What else? Yeah, and the volume of data is pretty small. In fact, I could probably write this whole data store as an object in a cookie if I wanted to. But since this to-do list is going to be used over a series of weeks, and I don't know what kind of shape my browser is going to be in long term, I figured a SQLite database managed by a back-end would be a fair thing to try, especially if it gets me time writing Rust, which is interesting in its own right. So yeah, that's a recap of the back-end work that was done over the last couple of days. Diesel's looking pretty good. Rocket seems to pair nicely with it. The connection pooling stuff, this is not really. I get anal about my my mods and so on, so yeah, that looks good, I guess. Mostly. I could at this point move, no, I don't like that at all. This is foolish. I'm going to put my U's with my mods up here that are not inline. And really, I should take this API mod and move it out into its own file. Separate it from the app bootstrapping, but whatever. It is what it is. So let's see. So the next thing on the agenda. Do I need the SQL? Yeah, I probably will. The next thing on the agenda is to kind of set up the client-side code. And so for that, I'm going to open up a terminal in the IDE here. And I'm just going to run the app in the background. I don't think I'll be making any changes here. I just need it up and running. So, yeah, I'm doing this work on Windows, which is not my usual thing for a development session. I usually work on Linux. But I just installed Node.js via the installer. Which is kind of weird, but let's see. Normally, I'm not quite sure how this is going to work. Actually, I should just commit. So I have a clean slate. I don't remember specifically what I just did, but it was just all pretty unimportant, I guess. Cleaning up. I did that unwrap expect. Yeah, whatever. That's fine. So I installed Create React App, which is a front-end project bootstrapper, and I guess I'm gonna give it a project name, which is silly. I'm gonna call it front-end. And I probably should have started this while I was talking about stuff, because this is probably going to take forever. But yeah, what is this doing? I feel like this output is not awesome on Windows. But if it actually works, downloads and installs all the stuff, then I guess that's good enough. But yeah, so Create React App, basically it sets up a whole project for you. It gives you a bunch of scaffolding. Normally when I do React work, I use a combination of Webpack and Babel, and those projects. So Webpack is a bundler and Babel is a transpiler, so it lets you write basically the bleeding edge JavaScript version, but then Babel will transpile it, which is to say convert the source code into the equivalent syntax for ECMAScript 5, which is what most browsers support. So it's important to have a rock solid configuration for that. So I think this thing generates like a Git repo like inside the project, which I won't need. There's a git ignore, but so if I cd to .git, cannot find path. Okay, good. I'll take the git ignore. That's good to have. Git ignores at any depth in your source tree will be respected theoretically. Though some of these, I don't know. These look like they might not. Interesting. Yeah, this really expects you to be at the root of the Git repo. But maybe if I just strip some of these leading slashes out of there, that'll work okay. In fact, really, no, that's fine. That's fine the way it is. I guess I'm just going to add this directory. There's going to be a bunch of stuff in here that isn't that important. The project comes with a README that's basically just the initial docs for how to work with the system. The index.html is what gets pulled up in the browser when you run the dev server. Register service worker. This is new. This wasn't a part of the scaffolding when I was last here. So this is the definition of the project that it spat out. It very nicely set my project to private, which is fair. Here's the README. So this is a whole bunch of docs. They're explaining all the different pieces. They don't talk about the service worker here. That's interesting. Somebody forgot. I can't find in the rendered version. Okay. Service worker. I don't know how this is. Well, I guess I can read this. I'm not particularly interested, but it's interesting to me that they jump right into talking about caching. Yeah, okay, well, whatever. So that's there. So if I npm, oh god, run start. So what just happened is it automatically popped open localhost 3000 in a browser tab. And so this is the default React app rendered. And they're correctly telling me that source app.js is the kind of entry point. There's this, yeah, I want to set up my IDE so it knows what flavor of JavaScript I'm talking. React JSX. JSX is like a DSL, a domain-specific language for generating components using notation that looks like HTML. I don't know why this doesn't appear to be doing any. Oh, it's indexing all the new source code. That's why. Okay. Register service worker. It's right there. Look at all this. I'm going to have to read up on this because that's a lot of stuff that I wasn't expecting. Huh. Yeah, so the index.js is what gets injected into the HTML document. Something I don't like about the way they set this stuff up is the index.html is side effecting, basically. As soon as this script executes, it's running the app. And the way that I had normally set this kind of thing up, if I was building Webpack config from scratch, is I would basically export a function to globals, and then I would call that function in a script tag in my HTML, so that no code anywhere that I could import would result in the framework executing a bunch of stuff. But that's just me, so no point in belly aching about it. I guess it's fine. So, okay, there's a bunch of stuff here that I don't need. I'll just take some simple text. And so, class name app. They're styling my stuff for me. And so part of the appeal of using a Webpack build like this is the development server allows these live updates to happen. So you see, as I make changes in my source code and I save the file, it recompiles in the terminal there, and the changes are automatically reflected in my browser. And there's varying degrees of hot reloading that can be supported. I don't know to what extent this one is working. Like, I know I've done setups in the past where you can dynamically reload style sheet changes without interfering with the application state that's active in the browser. But this may not support that, so it may like reset state on me a whole bunch. So I guess I'm hurting for terminals, because normally I like to be doing version control and stuff on this PowerShell over here, but PowerShell doesn't do tabs. Like, I can't pop open a new tab here. I don't really want to open another PowerShell. So I'm just going to use the IDE for this stuff. I guess it's super weird to be working in Windows. All my slashes are the wrong way. Oops. That's not what I meant. It's got to be double quotes. In fact, just give me Vim. Okay. So there are a couple of things that I know that I'm going to want right off the bat. I like using Immutable.js for dealing with collections. So I'm going to want that. What else will I want? So let's look at the MPM Search a little bit here. Key mirror, right? Yep, this is the one I want. So I'll add key mirror. Redux Thunks, I think is the name of it. This is why I have the NPM open. Hard to know which one is the legit one. I feel like this is it though, because Dan Abramov, or whatever his name is one of the collaborators. So Redux Thunk, not Thunks. And there's React Redux. There's some binding library. Yeah. So let's get all that stuff pulled down. That was quick. Okay. So what else will I want? Thinking about it. What would be nice is, oh yeah. So there's like no, this isn't it. I need Redux DevTools extension. And I'm gonna install that with a -D, which will save it to my dev dependencies rather than my regular application dependencies. And that'll help me maintain a separation between the stuff that my runtime application needs and the stuff that my application needs for building. It's usually the way I think about it. So there's the dev dependencies down there. I would almost hoist React scripts and put it down here. I don't know why it's a regular dependency. Oh, and there's one last thing that I would want. So there's this fetch API. If I look at the Mozilla docs for this, it's a little nicer than the traditional XHR API. It's a little more user friendly. It deals with promises. I mean, I guess I could use this probably instead of installing something else, because the target browser that I'm going to be running this application in is the OBS web view, whatever that renderer uses. And so if that thing supports fetch, then I shouldn't technically need anything else. But I could also just use Axios, which is good. I've had trouble using this library in unit tests, but since this project is so small, I'm not sure I would even write tests for any of this stuff. So I know that's a little cold, but yeah. Well, I'm still a little torn. I'm not sure this is exactly what I want to use. Yeah, forget it. I'm going to try and use fetch, and I'll get a small test working hopefully soon, and we'll either rule it out or figure out that we can use it, because then I'll learn about it. It's something I can take back to work with me. So we'll keep the docs open. Doesn't look too bad. I don't see a way to specify the method. Request options. Yeah, okay. That's okay, yeah. Just pass it a little object of options, I guess. And blob is the response body, I guess. Let's see. Because I feel like in JavaScript, a blob is just a series of bytes. Oh, good. Okay. So it does have a way to turn a response stream into a JSON object, which is great. There's also text. Okay, good. That'll work, I think. They're talking about both requests and responses contain body data. Okay, yeah, I guess this will work theoretically. So, all right. So I think there's one other thing that I need to verify here, and that is that the reverse proxy is still a thing for Webpack Dev Server. I know it is on the version I'm using at work, but let's see. So HTTP localhost on port 8000. That's where my Rust app is running. So, or at least I think it is. Okay, so yeah, it's a 404 because there's no route for the root. There's no handler, but we see that the response is being handled by Rocket, so we're in the right place. So what does that mean? That means that if the reverse proxy built into Webpack Dev Server is still a thing, then I should be able to kill this and rerun it. So there's hello world, but I should also have API zones. Maybe? Maybe not. Yeah, my buddy told me today that he had trouble getting this working, so we're gonna debug this real quick. So I'm gonna ask about create React app proxy. Using proxy. So this is still open. Did I imagine this working? Because I feel like I got it working. Okay. Yeah, this looks exactly like what I just did. Isn't it? That's what I expect. I would rather not have to set up some other web server so that I can put CORS headers on these endpoints. So they linked me to some details about configuring this thing manually right here. Oh, that was right down the page. So I'm kind of wondering if I need to install something special for it. Well, let's see. So they're saying that with the proxy in place, I should be able to fetch. And that is true. I should be able to. Oh, look at that. Connection refused. Oh, and I bet that's something dumb, like the lack of trailing slash or something like that. What could this be? Common API errors. Well, so yeah, there could be something weird with the host header. So weird. I wonder if it's like an allowed hosts kind of thing. Real quick. Oops, rocker is not what I meant. I just swallowed a hair out of my mustache. Gross. So, in the configuration, yeah, maybe I need to change my bind address for some reason. It shouldn't really matter though, because it's a local host to local host. So I don't necessarily buy that I need to set this. But we'll try it just to be sure. Oh, wait, no. Yeah, nothing gets through. So if I do, crap. Normally I would just type env and then a bunch of key values, but I'm on Windows. So instead, I'll use a configuration file, rocket.toml. I don't want to add this to my repo yet. And so it should be using development by default. Secret key I don't care about. I don't even know how many cores I have. Jeez. How do I see that? Task manager. Performance. Four cores. Okay. Well. It seems silly to have so many. You know what? Don't even worry about it. I don't care about staging or production. This is all Owen cares about. The port, the address, the log level. That's what I need. Whoa. Really? You're going to ask me permission to bind to 0.0.0.0? Okay. Okay. I guess that makes good sense. So now that seems to have gone nowhere. I'm not getting any errors out of this, but oops. Okay. So I asked for zones again. Oh wait. Oh, it's resolved. Oh, maybe this worked. I don't see anything happening on the Rocket server side, which is odd. So I'll just log out the response if I get one. I'm not getting one. I did get one. Well, holy shit. Look at that. Yep, those are my zones. So why did it come through? I don't think the log worked correctly. Oh my god, Stanley. You big goof. Oh. Jumping up here. So yeah, I mean, that just... The logging is garbage for some reason. Oh my god. Get out of here, Stan. Get off of me. So what can I do different about this? All right, well, I guess what I'll do is I'll go back to the MDN docs, right? MDN fetch, and I'll again look at the responses. Body used. Okay, so this is also a promise. Oh, I get it. So this is kind of classic. In JavaScript, now that we have promises, people are using this like an either or a try. You know, where you have success or failure. It's yeah, that's super weird. But so instead of this, what I could do is I could say, then we can chain it. So we can have that first promise return a second promise, and then in here I can log out the data. Am I crazy? Why does this not work? I don't understand. Now it's resolved. This is weird. I don't know if I like this. Well, Okay, the good news is I'm getting responses. So the proxy's working now, and I guess it's because shit, was it because I switched to using the actual IP, or was it because of my rocket.toml? So now I need to rename this file. And then rerun the server. All right. Yeah, it was the bind address for some reason. Well, I guess. Super weird. But totally fine. Totally fine. This is something that I can just deal with. What I don't get is why these promises coming back from this fetch suck so much ass. It's resolved, but this isn't being triggered at all. Does my console output? That's what's happening here. Oh, look at that shit. Look at that shit. Is that real? Look at that. Oh my god. Chrome. What the fuck? Okay, so God, I was feeling like I was going crazy. Where's my output? This shit is crazy. Why? But there it is. Okay, so I've got error handling. I've got a nice kind of monadic chain of things. Not too bad. Okay, fetch. You work. You're totally fine. It was my browser, because I don't do web development on Windows. So why would my DevTools be set up for things that I need? Like, why would that be the case? All right. Well, so let's see. Where have we gotten to at this point? We've made some changes. We've got a rocket .toml. Line endings, sure. Cost of doing business on Windows, I guess. What else do we have? We have a bunch of new packages, which it's going to take me a little while to set everything up. It's kind of a chore to get a Redux setup happening from zero. but we'll get there. I just realized I'm sitting in front of all this typing I'm doing, so I apologize. Okay, so that's where we are. What I'll probably do is log off briefly and get some of the boilerplate out of the way off stream, because setting up the initial reducers and initial states and configuring the store and all of that kind of stuff, that'll, I don't know, take me 45 minutes of just slogging through it. But I'll try and recap on the next stream and share exactly what I've put in place. But yeah, this is great. This is really encouraging. Fetch is it's still a little odd, but I get the design choice to have like everything be a promise on here. And the reason that's interesting is because, you know, this response body here, if that was plain text, all of a sudden, unexpectedly, and you tried to parse it as a JSON object, that would throw an error. And so by making it a promise, you kind of get that option semantics where the operation of converting the body into JSON is either successful or failure. And so now you've got the initial request could be success or failure based on network conditions. And then assuming it worked, you've got the potential decode of whatever the data is. And again, assuming that all worked, then you can act upon it. Or you can, essentially, if an error occurs at any step of the way, it short circuits all the way down to the error catch down here. And so that's a nice way to handle things. And again, this is a lot like how you might do things in Scala, where I spend a lot of time. So that's good. I just got to remember that it's all promises. It shouldn't be that hard, but it's new, so it's okay. Not bad. A short stream tonight, but yeah, I'll get back on and do some more work tomorrow. This was mostly setup, I guess. But yeah, tomorrow we'll get into some actual UI development, and it's not going to look nice. Not up front. It's going to be pretty rustic. Just simple HTML controls. Nothing fancy. I may try to do something fancy. I've got actually, let me roll this back here. So I have this idea at work that using a CSS framework with a bunch of opinionated, polished features is or widgets, I guess is what I really meant by that, will get us into more trouble than not. And so what I'm looking for is for a framework that is pretty bare bones that we can embellish after the fact. And so I'm looking at Foundation, which is Zerb Foundation. And because I'm working in React, I'm looking for libraries that wrap the components. Show me the showcase, I guess. Okay. So Zerb is used for a lot of like design projects, I guess. There's a separate, what is it called? There are separate projects for sites versus apps versus email. Foundation for emails. And if you've ever had to do, you know, rich email, my God, what a chore. Still, I'm not doing email, so it doesn't matter to me, but at work we do a lot of email. And so if we can have some kind of a framework that gives us a consistent look between our applications and the email we send out, that'd be pretty cool. Yeah, they used to have Foundation for apps. I don't know what happened to that. Doesn't look like it's a thing anymore. Maybe they rolled it together with sites for version 6. But yeah, it's pretty minimal, which I think is a benefit, certainly to us at work. Bootstrap has a really distinct style, and yes, you can customize it a bit. It still is always gonna be kind of Bootstrap, but I think we can really push this. I don't know. Stanley, what's going on? Oh, he's crying for some unknown reason. Anyway, so there are a couple of different React Foundation libraries. None of them really have a whole lot of action going on GitHub. We're talking like 4 or 5 contributors on each project. Not that many stars. Nobody's paying attention. But I don't know. Maybe there's enough here, and maybe there's enough work happening upstream that you don't really need a whole lot of people to maintain this stuff. You know, because they're just wrapping basic JS widgets that are being supplied by the framework itself. So I'm going to take one of these two for a test drive, I think, depending if we get there. Yeah. So that's it. We got a hello world. We got fetch working in Chrome, and hopefully that'll work in the OBS browser. And if it doesn't, we'll just plug something else in. And yeah, so I'm gonna flesh out the Redux pattern stuff, and see y'all next time. Thanks for watching.